Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. It is an absolute privilege to have with us former number one doubles player in the world, a four-time Grand Slam women's doubles champion, and now a very successful commentator with ESPN, and also the host of the Rennae Stubbs Tennis Podcast. Please welcome to the pod, Rennae Stubbs. Rennae, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and chatting tennis with us.
You're all very welcome. Nice to be here.
Current snapshot, just, where are you at? What's keeping you busy? What's keeping you busy other than watching some astounding clay court tennis, both on the men's and women's side?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, about 3 days ago, I caught the dreaded COVID. So I'm sitting here at home in New York City, where I live. I'm about to get going, head over to France for tournament leading up to the French Open. I don't know if I'll be able to get away for that one now, but I'll be definitely at the French Open. I'm still coaching Sam Stosur she's playing doubles only now, just to help her finish her career off the way she wants to. And obviously still working for ESPN. Yeah, I'm ready. The good thing about, there's no such thing as good thing about having COVID, but one good thing about it is you're right. I have been able to sit here and watch every single tennis match in Madrid over the last few days. And what a great tournament it's been so far.
It's been amazing, and hope your symptoms are not bad, and hope you get better real soon and you could resume your travels. And we're going to get into some of the tennis. We're going to get into your playing career and coaching and broadcasting as well. But first, Steve and I wanted to mention a couple players to you and kind of talk about, hear your views on them. And the first one, and I know she's near and dear to your heart. Steve and I have talked about her before. We've talked about it with other guests, but Barty, and for how good she is on the court, you hear just as good, if not better, things about her off the court. I know you know her pretty well. Would love to hear your insight on Ash, and if there's a small possibility of her maybe still possibly coming back.
Well, I'll answer the last question first. I think the possibility of her coming back is very, very small. I just feel like, when her coach said that the first Grand Slam that she won at the French Open, the first thing out of her mouth to him was, "Can I retire now?" That should tell you quite a lot about her. Most players, when they win a Grand Slam or they win a big tournament, they get that drug. And I say that playing athletics for a living or being a professional sports athlete is it's like legal addiction, right? So you get that high, you get that hit. Oh my God, can I win another Grand Slam? This is the best feeling ever. For Ash, I think for her to make the statement of, "Can I retire now?" that means that she didn't want the high continually over and over. And some players just need that for their ego to keep going, and then they get to 35 and they feel like time is running out and they want to win another one. And I think for Ash, it was more along the lines of, okay, I came back from the first retirement to probably answer a lot of questions that she still had about herself and her own ability to, how good could she be? Because everyone kept telling her how good she could be. And I think once she won that Grand Slam, she was like, okay, I've answered all the questions. I'm really good. I can win a Grand Slam. Can I stop now? Because I really don't like this life. I don't like traveling. I don't like being away from my family. She's not a big fan of being in the gym, got to be honest. I mean, as much as practice, not the lover of practice either. So I think all of that cumulative, when she won Wimbledon, I think that just answered every single question that she could possibly be answered ever. And to say as an Australian that you win Wimbledon, it's like, oh my God, there's nothing bigger in tennis to you as an Aussie growing up. And then I think she could have really put her rackets down after that and been done. But I think, again, the answer of could she win the Aussie, those questions are continually in her brain. And I think once she did that, she's just like, none of this is making me happier. I don't like traveling. I think COVID really ruined her. I think being home for that period of time, the first year in 2020, I think she actually loved it so much that she would have had a lot of money in the bank at that point. She probably thought, why do I want to keep doing this? And then, of course, she comes back and spends 6 months on the road in 2021, and playing Wimbledon and all of that pressure on her shoulders. And I think the dichotomy of staying home for 8 months the year before, being away for 6 months, I think it just answered the question in her, which was, yes, I'm very good. I've already won all these things. I'm number one in the world. I've got all the money in the world that I need for my simple life, because she likes to live a simple life. And I don't want to be away anymore. I much prefer being at home. And I think all of those cumulative effects is what allowed her to say, I'm done.
So you're saying the chances are slim and none that she'll come back.
Yeah, I'm more on the category of slim and none. And I think, Steve, one of the reasons is that I think she's answered all the questions that she wants to. She doesn't need to, in her own mind, I had a conversation with her on text prior to her coming back the first time, and I still have it on my phone. And it was, she was very down on herself for not winning a Grand Slam in doubles. I think at that point had lost 4 in the finals, but she was so young. I was like, first of all, I think what you've achieved already at your young age is incredible. But she was very down on herself, like, loser, never won one, blah, blah, blah. But that was before she came back. So I think she had like this love-hate relationship with tennis. And so I think, Steve, when she came back and just accomplished so much in that time, and as I said, she's a very simple girl from a town called Ipswich, outside of Brisbane. She built her dream home on the golf course in just outside of Ipswich, very small town. She's so happy. She's so happy walking her dogs, playing golf every day, not having the pressure of traveling, not having the pressure of the expectation on her shoulders. And I really think that she doesn't want that feeling ever again.
Well, I will say this, and we'll end it with this. As a tennis fan, selfishly, tennis fans, especially in Australia, were happy she did not put her rackets down after Wimbledon, because what she did in Australia, and I mentioned this to Steve and a few others, that was a Steffi Graf-like run through Australia. Oh, yeah. She absolutely dominated. She didn't break Steffi's record, but she of fewest games lost through a slam, but it was close. And it was so great to see her do that. And we wish her much happiness, obviously.
I think just on that, I think one of the reasons why she played so well there was because I think she was already in her heart knowing that she was done. And I think that this was just like, I'm just going to go out and play. I'm just going to go and play. If I win, great. If I don't, I think I'm done. So I think she went out there with not a lot of pressure on her shoulders in the respect of, if I win, great. If I don't, look, I've achieved more than I ever expected. I think she really thought, I'm probably going to be done after this anyway. So just go and enjoy every minute of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Another player who just very recently, a few days ago, recently retired. I'm biased towards him because I'm a Chicago guy. He played at University of Illinois. Kevin Anderson, 2-time Grand Slam finalist, made the finals in 2017, lost to Rafa in the final. 2018, we remember he had some brutal matches leading up to that final. Not to say that he would have beaten Novak in that final, but it would have been nice if he had a little bit more gas in the tank to say, another person like Ash, where everyone loved him on the court, everyone loved him off the court. He got the most out of every ounce of his body as a tennis player. And I'll ask both of you, Steve, I'll ask you first, Kevin Anderson.
Well, I thought he was a great professional, and I was hoping he could sustain the pace that you were talking about, David, in 17 and 18. Those were great highlights for him, and didn't have much of a chance in either final against Rafa or Novak. But I just thought he was so likable and so committed, and as a big guy, fun to watch. I enjoyed watching him play his attacking game, and he was earnest, and there was no nonsense with him. I think he was a great credit to the game, and did a lot of great work for the ATP as well that has not been talked about enough.
Absolutely. I'll agree with that in every way. And actually a really big supporter of the LGBTQ community. He's done a lot of stuff for them and has come out to a bunch of events that the Grand Slams have put on, he and his wife. Just a really, as you said, just a really classy guy. Got everything he could out of his career. I think going to college was a great step for him, coming from South Africa. And of course, Craig Tiley, who's a Tennis Australia's tournament director of the Australian Open, and of course he's been through the headlines a little bit lately. But
he was Kevin's coach at University of Illinois as well.
Yeah, that's right. He was his coach. I just think Kevin really handled himself so beautifully. And I think him getting to 2 finals is pretty remarkable, to be honest. I think he would take that and be very proud of himself for that, especially in the period of the greatest 3 players of all time.
100%. I got 2 more for you, and these 2, I'm so excited to hear your views. I'll start with you, Rennae, on this one. Ons Jabeur just wins Madrid, a player that you love to watch, but if you are on the other side of that net, just brutal to play against. Again, another player that everyone loves off the court. I know you're a huge fan of Ons. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on her.
I am a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Ons for reasons off the court. I think she's she is absolutely the nicest player on tour. There are a lot of great people on tour. She is absolutely up there. She is everyone's babysitter. Always, any player that has a child, Ons Jabeur is all over them, like grabs the kids, plays with them. She is kind to everybody. She's happy every time you see her. She's just such a joy to be around as a human being. And then her tennis speaks for itself. The variety of her game. It's interesting because she plays a little bit like Ash, where she uses the slice backhand so beautifully to be able to defend, change the pace. And of course, she has a better 2-hander than Ash ever did. Ash has a better serve and had a better serve, but Ons can serve really well sometimes and be very sneaky with her serve. So I think the possibility of Ons winning a Grand Slam is super high. She has all the shots, and of course, the drop shot from hell for everybody to play against. And the reason why her drop shot is so good, very similar to Alcaraz, is that she pummels the ball. She hits a big forehand. Her 2-handed backhand is big, and she can hit the slice long in the court. So when you have the ability to push your opponents back with your ground strokes, when you hit the drop shot, it's very difficult to read because of the fact that she hits the ball so big from the back of the court as well. So that variety, like Alcaraz, is what makes her drop shot so well. And in the women's game, just maybe not so much in the men's, but in the women's, moving someone forward is absolutely important. And she is not only great off the court, but her tennis speaks for itself.
Well, I swear that to the listeners, Rennae has not seen the outline, but she mentioned the next player that we were going to ask about, and that's Carlos Alcaraz, obviously. I'm going to start with Steve on this one first, and then we're going to hear Rennae's thoughts. Steve, in our year-end segment, predicted Carlos would be top 10. Carlos has made good on Steve's prediction in less than 6 months of the year. Okay. He's the only player to beat both Rafa and Novak back-to-back on clay. There's 5 other players that have done it, but not on a clay court back-to-back. We know he could win on hard court. You saw what he did in Miami. You saw the latter part of last year when he played that unbelievable match on Tsitsipas, who Tsitsipas still has not beaten. They played unbelievable matches. Tsitsipas has not beaten Carlos. Steve, I'll ask you this. You can take your prediction that's already done and good, and you could stay with that, or you can raise the stakes. And at the end of the year, do you think this kid may be top 5, top 3, or maybe even higher?
No, I honestly believe that you look at what he's done already, and he's got Miami in the bank. He's got Barcelona in the bank. As we speak, he's in the finals in Madrid. I honestly believe he's going to complete the year as the number 1 player in the world, because I think he's going to play more than Rafa or Novak. Novak is at a real disadvantage, having missed Australia and just trying to get back to the very top of his game. He's closing in on it now, but he missed a lot of time, and that was very costly for him. Rafa, I think, is going to be selective in where he goes and where he plays. He's going to conceivably do very well right through the end of the clay court. So this kid is like Rafa in 05. He's ready for every single match and every tournament he plays. The difference is, I think he's now great on all the surfaces. We don't know yet about the grass, but he certainly is almost equally good on hard courts and clay. And I think he's scary good. And I think that semifinal with Djokovic in Madrid to me was the match of the year. And Novak wasn't 100%, but he was getting much closer to the top of his game, and he still couldn't fend him off. I can't see how he doesn't finish top 5, but I believe he'll end the year at number 1, because I want to hear what Rennae thinks, but the likes of Medvedev, of course, has got problems and won't be able to play Wimbledon, and he's a moody guy, and I don't think he can sustain it winning strings of tournaments. Zverev, we've seen up and down. Tsitsipas is going to be right up there, but I don't know how many titles he'll necessarily win. He'll get to a lot of semis and finals. This kid could win 7, 8 tournaments this year, in my view. So I'm very high on him.
Well, I don't know if you could tell from the nodding of my head throughout that whole entire thing, Steve, but I agree with you. I think that there is a real chance that he can be number 1 in the world by the end of the year. There's no doubt in my mind as well. And I know everyone's probably like, oh my God, you guys are jumping to, come on, best of 5 is different to best of 3. And that is all true. But at present, as Steve already pointed out, and was what people need to understand, there's a 12-month rotation of points. And I don't believe he has a lot of points to defend. Obviously, the US Open, he had some terrific wins, but he doesn't have a lot of points to defend. It'll be interesting to see him play on grass, although Wimbledon is so different to what it was back 20 years ago. I mean, it is a slow court. It is almost slower than the hard courts that you can play on at times, especially the US Open. So it'll be interesting to see him play there. But I think this last week or two, or since Miami, has really galvanized him to believe. And that's the key. The key is not talent. We already knew he had talent. But the truth is, can you mentally grasp being the best player in the world? And I think after what he's just done over the last couple of days, and the last couple of months really, has proven to him that he can be the best player in the world. And that's what it takes. It takes the mental ability to be able to make yourself believe that you can be the best. And his tennis is good enough. He has no weakness in his game, 0. And I think I love the fact that he actually goes into the net a tremendous amount to finish points off. And I think that was always going to be the next bastion of great player, is the player that really wants to get in, like Tsitsipas, same thing, but he is better from the back of the court than Tsitsipas, particularly on the back end. So he moves better than any player on tour. He's equivalent to Novak when Novak was his best. He has the splits. He can get out wide. He can explosively move forward, side to side. And mentally, and I cannot stress that enough, you have to believe you can win these big matches. And he's proven that now. Clearly, we'll see what he can do at the Grand Slams, because he hasn't really done that yet, but he's 19. So there's no doubt in my mind, by the end of the year, he can be number 1 as well.
Wow. That's awesome. No, that was great to hear your insight on those players. We want to get into your career a bit, because I mean, what a career you had. 4 Grand Slam titles in women's doubles, 2 Grand Slam titles in mixed doubles. You won 3 of your 4 women's doubles titles with Lisa Raymond. I always ask when we have people who were very successful in the doubles court, how'd you wind up playing with Lisa, and talk a little bit about how well you two meshed together?
Yeah, that's a very sordid story there, my friends. But look, we, as Steve laughs, but we became very good friends, and we played our first tournament in Quebec City 100 years ago. And we gelled immediately. And I think what makes a great doubles partnership is also, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses? And also, it's also needs to be about your personalities. And I'm very aggressive, and I was, I'm a little bit of a coach on the court. I need to play with somebody who's going to be receptive to me being a little up and down emotionally, and also be receptive to me telling them sort of what to do. And if anyone listens to this that has played with me, will be laughing their heads off right now. But that's just a fact. And when I played with Lisa, that gelled perfectly, because we both played great at the net. We both had very good serves. Lisa was a better returner than me, but I took advantage of the good returns. And then, eventually we actually got into a relationship, and we played against each other when we weren't really sure if we should play together. And this was prior to us being in a relationship. And she started playing with Gabriella Sabatini, and I can't remember what year it was. And I was kind of playing with random people. And then we played against each other in, I think, a quarterfinal or semifinal somewhere in, I believe in not Charleston, in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And we played against each other for the first time when we were together as a partnership, as a relationship. And it was a set all in our match, and it rained, and we had to go back to the hotel together. And I said to her, this is a nightmare. We cannot play against each other like this. This is terrible, because we were always going to play each other, because we were both very good doubles players. So we would continually play against each other if this was going to stay the way it was. So it was one of the reasons for us to play together, is so we didn't have to play against each other. And clearly that worked out very well, because we won 33 tournaments together. you know, 3 Grand Slams. We did that for 6 or 7 years together as a partnership, and then we broke up, and all the shit hit the fan and all of that sort of stuff. But we were very, very good together as a partnership. We didn't have a lot of weaknesses on the court, and I would pull her out of some depressive moments on court, and Lisa was known to sort of hide away when she got nervous, and I tended to be over the top. So we balanced each other out really well on the court, and our success came from keeping each other together emotionally, but also our games just meshed really well together.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing those stories. Always interesting to hear how successful doubles partnerships wind up. So thank you for sharing that. The broadcasting aspect of it, and you're phenomenal at ESPN. We love your work there. Was that something that you kind of sought out and reached out to your contacts that you knew on tour in the media space, or was that something that you had no idea that you were going to get involved in this and they sort of reached out to you? How did that all get started?
It's a really interesting story, to be honest. But when I was back, I think I was 19 years of age. I was just starting on tour, was playing a tournament in Australia. And Steve will know a great man in Australian television broadcasting by the name of Gary Wilkinson. So Gary Wilkinson came up to me at a player party in Brisbane. And, he was so lovely. And he said, well, what do you want to do when you're done playing, Rennae? And I was like, well, calm down, Gary. I'm only 19. I'm just starting my career. I'm not thinking about the next life. And I said, I don't know, maybe I could get into broadcasting like you or something. And it was sort of a joke, but sort of not. Because I thought I could be good at it. But as I said, I was just starting my own tennis career. And he said, well, really interesting. Why don't you do a match with me tomorrow? And this is prior to television being really sort of, I don't know, it was less of a machine, with networks picking up tennis events and things. And clearly, because he said, why don't you work with me tomorrow? So I did a match with him. And it was Nicole Pratt against Sabine Appelmans, I'll never forget, in Brisbane. And I did my first television match with him. And I was just starting my tennis career. So I think immediately I thought, I can actually do this. I'm not bad. I'm a decent analyst. And I'm comfortable on television. So what I did throughout my career is anytime anyone asked me to do a little TV or, radio or anything like that, I always said yes. And I was very serious about my tennis career. But whenever I was given the opportunity, whether it worked for local TV stuff in Australia or I did some Eurosport when I was at the French Open, they were sort of like plucking players. Hey, would you do a match here and there? I always said yes. And then in 1997, I believe it was, or actually at the end of 96, I did a random couple of things for ESPN, and a little bit because of Mary Carrillo, our very good friend. Mary, I always passed on a bit of knowledge to Mary. If she asked me about some players, I always give her sort of a synopsis of them. And was the comeback of Monica Seles in Canada. And Betsy Nagelson was working for ESPN with Mary Carrillo, but Betsy wanted to watch Monica's comeback live. She wanted to be in the box for Monica because her late husband, Mark McCormack, was her agent. And so Betsy didn't want to call the match. She wanted to watch the match. So ESPN said to Mary, well, what are we going to do? And Mary said, well, Rennae Stubbs is here. Why don't you let me do the match with her? And so good for them. They said, sure. Okay. They trusted Mary. And so I did the match with Mary. So I kind of had my foot in the door with ESPN, and then they asked me to do one or two things else. And then 97, I got injured with my wrist. And for some reason, Dennis Denninger from ESPN called me and said, hey, would you mind doing the finals of the Australian Open with Cliff Drysdale? Because Betsy Nagelson had to leave for some reason. And I said, sure, I'm injured. I'm not playing. I'll do it. So I did my first ever Grand Slam final with Cliff Drysdale. It was Martina Hingis against Mary Pierce. And it was a very quick match. And that was sort of it. I sort of got my foot in the door there with them. And then throughout my career, once I stopped playing, I just kept going to people saying, hey, I'd love to do some work. I never had an agent. And I think I just got my foot in the door just from my personality and going up and saying, I want to work.
Rennae, you've always had a knack, though. Ben and I have talked about this privately, but you really see the game well. I'm not expressing that very well as a writer, but what I'm getting at is there are a lot of former players on the airwaves, as you know. You're surrounded by them, and they're all very, very good. but there's something about your insights and your confidence in your insights, and they're often borne out clearly. The viewer can see that you know what you're talking about. Did you feel that this was something you had going for you, going back to your playing days? Is it the fact that what are the main reasons you see why you have had this view of the game and an ability to dissect it so well? Was that always?
Yeah, I don't know, Steve. I think that I'm a big believer in knowing your lane, right? This is in business or in life or whatever it is. And, you know, I don't propose to anybody that I know how to run a business, for example. So if I'm ever going to do that, I get somebody to run my business for me, right? And I just feel like my lane is being able to watch a tennis match and emotionally, not just tactically, but emotionally read the game. It does come innately and naturally to me. I don't know how or don't know why, but I can sit and watch a match. I can watch someone's slight movement. I'll give you an example. You know, Azarenka, Serena Williams semifinal a couple of years ago in the pandemic.
Unbelievable match.
Well, interestingly, you know, knowing Serena so well, and obviously knowing Vika, but also Serena more importantly, and knowing what she was trying to accomplish there. She was dominating that match, up a set, 6-love or 6-1, whatever it was, first set. And she missed a return on break point, I believe it was, to go up 2-love, I think. So it was to really blow this match apart. And she missed the return in the net. And I was not commentating the match. I was actually not on that match. But I was courtside because there was nobody in the crowd. So I thought I'd sit in the crowd, you know. And I remember when she hit that return into the net, and her body language told me everything I needed to know at that moment. Because as a player, I was incredibly emotional. So I think that is something that is hard for some people who commentate to get, because they weren't emotional maybe. So they don't feel those feelings like I do. So I saw that night, oh my God, the whole match just changed, because I knew Serena got unbelievably tight in that moment. And knowing Vika, she will never give up. And also knowing their past, and also knowing what Serena was trying to achieve, I knew that that was the moment that the whole match changed. And then vice versa in the final, when Vika missed a relative, for her, a backhand she didn't put away to go up a set in 3-love. You see someone's body language, and that's the time that I will say it on air. Because as you said, Steve, I sort of sometimes put myself on the line by saying stuff that I do, but it's something that I'm a very frontal lobe person, and what I feel comes out of my mouth, sometimes too often, and sometimes too often on Twitter. But I feel like you got to put yourself on the line. And I feel like that's what I do when I commentate. I see it and I talk it and I say it immediately. And whether it could be just how someone plays too, but it's more, I think, more the emotional side. And it's also what helps me with coaching as well.
Yeah, I want to get into the coaching in a second. But before, when you said the Serena Vika match, and my just wide smile came up. It's because, yeah, that was during the pandemic, but that was the second match that night. The first match was Jen Brady versus Naomi Osaka. A lot of tennis fans will remember that night as one of the best nights of tennis. I don't care, men or women. That was one of the best nights of tennis that we've seen. I mean, the level that night was ridiculous. And we had Jen on, and we talked a lot about that match. What a night as a tennis fan to watch both those matches.
Yeah, that was an incredible night. And, you know, back on that semifinal with Jen, I don't think I said it that night, but I did feel it. When Jen didn't query, I believe it was at 4-3 to go down the break in the third, and she had 3 challenges, and she hit a ball that was on the line on break point, and they called it out, and she did not question that challenge and did not challenge that call, which to me pisses me off, because I'm like, we had the technology, and you guys know how I feel about, you know, the electronic line calling. If we'd had electronic line calling, it would have been Jen's point, or she may have won that point, and she may have served herself out of that trouble. And it may have been 4-all. Instead, it became 5-3, I believe, and Naomi served the match out. Just like that. In 5 minutes, it was over. And in my mind, Jen didn't challenge that. And that was me thinking subconsciously that Jen didn't think she could win that match.
And she talked about that with us when she was in the finals of Australia. She said that just with us, Steve, and I know you recently chatted with her. I listened to it, and she said that too, the belief that she didn't necessarily have the belief that Grand Slam final. That's interesting you say that.
But hey, don't you think in turn, that also is maybe partially Jen's lack of experience being in a big US Open semifinal and not having a greater sense of taking advantage of the technology and how she owed it to herself to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Only Jen will be really able to answer that question. But for me, it comes more down to the self-belief. I call it the subconscious and conscious mind. And I think the subconscious mind is the one that always wins in the end. And I only can say that because that's what happened to me. But I think the subconscious mind was the whole time was going, oh my God, can I win this match? Can I be in the final? This is crazy. And then that call came, and rather than be like, hell no, I'm not going down today. That ball was on the line. I need to see a challenge. She was just like, okay, and turned around and went and got a towel. And I was like, what do you do? You've got 3 challenges. Even if you think it may be in or out, challenge. But that was a sort of like the way Lindsay Davenport used to be, or, my old doubles partner, Lisa Raymond. Instead of dealing with it, they would rather just shut down. And that's their way of dealing with pressure. And it's nothing against them. It's not to say that she didn't want to win the match, but that's their way of dealing with pressure, is to shut down. Mine was to fight. It's fight or flight, right? And I would have bitched to the umpire like for 5 minutes until they checked that mark, right? Whereas Jen, because she's that person that's kind of a little bit shy, she went the other way. And maybe a big lesson, I don't know, because I've seen Wozniacki did the same thing years and years before at the US Open. So, and she's not somebody that wouldn't query something. So I don't know, only she can answer that question, but what a F up that was.
Oh my God, it was unbelievable. I want to go into the coaching because you mentioned earlier with Sam Stosur, and it ties into your broadcasting abilities. Obviously, as a player, you've experienced what these current players are and the players that you work with are doing on a court. But my question for you is, since you're also so good in the booth upstairs or at courtside, has that helped you? Do you think that's helped you in your coaching abilities to have both, not only the playing experience, but also now you've stepped outside of that a little bit and see it in another angle, another way? Do you think that helps you in your coaching abilities when you're working with players?
I mean, maybe in some respects, because I've watched so much tennis and I have to, talk about it, and I have to, watch a lot of players. So clearly I get to see them. I think one of the reasons I ended up getting into coaching in a lot of ways is because really Karolina Pliskova, out of the blue, I'd done a little bit of coaching. I traveled a little bit with Casey Delacroix when she was coming back from her, falling and hitting her head, and coming back from that and her injuries, and a little bit of here and there with Sam Stosur. But really, I hadn't really been in the coaching, realm. Nobody really knew me as a coach. And then Karolina Pliskova, out of the blue, just text messages me and is like, hey, can you come to Asia with me? What? Like, I'd had maybe 5 or 6 conversations with Karolina. But I think one of the reasons why I haven't asked her this question, probably should, but I think one of the reasons why she wanted me in her coaching staff is because she had watched me, because I know how much she watches tennis, had watched me, and her husband had commented to me on Twitter that they really liked my commentary. And I think one of the things that meaning is that I think they liked my view of what I was seeing, what I was watching, and how I could pick apart somebody when I was commentating. And I think they thought, why not get that in our coaching, group? And so when we started working together, she did quite well. She made the semis of the championships that year, had some tremendous wins over great players and Muguruza and Venus, and came very close to being in the final. And then it was just a one-off thing, but I think they really enjoyed it. And then when she was struggling the next year, because she'd already agreed to work with somebody else the next year, when they weren't doing well, she called me up again and was like, I'm struggling. Would you help me out again? And then subsequently for 6 months, she did really, really well. And so I think I got my name out there with the coaching situation that way. But I think what makes me a decent coach is that emotionally, I get what they're going through, and emotionally, I can read a player really well. And I know when it's time to sometimes be really hard on them, and I know when it's time to be really loving towards them and get them to tell me where they're at emotionally. On top of being able to obviously pick apart an opponent quite well. I'm very good, obviously, with analyzing a player and knowing how to beat them and knowing what will work and what won't. So all of those things, maybe, I think it's less about the commentary. I think it got me a job, but I think it's more about my ability to be able to see and pick apart and give somebody a good game plan, but also to understand why they aren't better and being able to tell them why and how they can get better. I think that's more about it. I think emotionally I tap into a lot of things for them.
Got it. Hey, we'll end, before I ask Steve, before we end it for anything else, I want to talk a little bit about the podcast, your podcast, because I know it recently changed the name to the Rennae Stubbs Podcast. I know that's all part of Racket, which you're heavily involved in. You've had awesome guests. I love it. I really enjoy listening to it. Tell a little bit about how much fun you're having with that, because you've done it for quite a while now.
Yeah, I mean, I solely rely, as you know, on, just calling up players and texting them and be like, hey, would you be on the podcast, and finding them to get time to do it. I really enjoy it. One of the things that I love about, and I always say this when I do my on-court commentary or my on-court interviews, I always say to players, this is your chance. This is your chance to show people who you really are, not the person that they think on the tennis court. Because if anyone watched me play, they think I was the biggest bitch in the world. I mean, I was psycho. Right? I mean, Steve, you laugh, but it's true. Like, anyone who watched me, God, she's so mean. She's so this and that. But off the court, I'm completely different to that. So it's I say to them, this is your chance to show who you really are. Okay. Smile, act, be relaxed, be yourself. So when I interview them, I really want to show a different side of them. And I also want people to know at home how hard this life is. And it is not an easy life to be a professional tennis player. And the stresses that they go through. And, my recent interview with Marta Kostyuk, of course, from Ukraine, I mean, talking about everything that she's going through. And it's really nice when people tweet to me or text me and say, wow, I really learned a lot about her. And, if I can give little stories and little anecdotes where they can tell people what they went through, like Sam Stosur, even, who I know as well as anyone, told me, I don't think I've ever told you this story, and told me that one of the stories about her playing Serena Williams in the final and what she thought when Serena did something. And I was like, no, I never knew that story. She goes, yeah, I really never told many people that story. So when people tell me that stuff on the pod, I'm like, this is what I want. I want people to know more about this life as a tennis player, what you go through on the court, and who you really are as a person. And when I get to the end of it and I push, stop on my record, I'm like, oh, that was great. I hope people find you as great as I do. And that's really what I want to do when I do the podcast.
Well, I think when I hit stop on this record, we're going to repeat your similar thoughts right there, because this has been awesome. And Steve, before we let Rennae go, and we so appreciate it, we know we call people like you gamers, because you're not 100% right now, dealing with COVID right now, and you've been awesome this whole time.
I'm wiping my nose. And
So, Steve, before we let Rennae go, anything else that you want to chat about?
I just want to throw in one last question, Rennae. Number one, you obviously established an excellent rapport with Serena Williams. It comes through very clear. Some of the interviews you've done with her through the years, she seems to see you as more of a friend than a broadcaster. How did that develop? And secondly, to get back to Sam Stosur, why, after that brilliant 2011 US Open when she destroyed Serena, did we not see more great singles from her? I thought she might be capable of winning a couple more majors after that. It really didn't happen. Very likable woman. I thought a great player. So just your thoughts on the friendship with Serena and why Sam didn't perhaps back up that US Open triumph with a couple more majors.
Well, first on Sam, look, I think that Sam, first of all, she got really unlucky with injuries. Really unlucky. I think she could have very well won the French Open the year that Ostapenko won it. She was leading Ostapenko a set and maybe even a break, and always beat Ostapenko, had the perfect game to beat her. And then the players after that, really, Sam had a great record against on clay. She'd won Strasbourg the week before, so her confidence was sky high. We all know that her best surface was clay, even though she won the US Open. And she sustained a terrible fracture in her hand in the match playing Ostapenko, and was literally almost won the match, lost it 6-4 in the third, literally running around her forehand to hit backhands, because to hit the forehand had hurt her hand so much. And, subsequently Ostapenko went on to win that tournament. So she was just so unlucky with that way. She got Lyme's disease, had various different issues after that. And I think to be honest with you, I think she actually overachieved. I really believe that. I think and I don't say that in a derogatory way. Sam, the way she played, and she was so highly strung, and she did have the massive serve and the massive forehand, but I think she achieved so much in her career, Steve. I think she would be so pleased with what she achieved. I think not winning the French is the one thing that I think really still bothers her, not beating Schiavone in that final. But Schiavone played the match of her life. And if you talk about Sam, she beat, I believe, in that tournament, Serena, Henin, and Jankovic. And the three of them, I think, were like 1, 2, and 3 in the world. I mean, it was kind of like what Leylah Fernandez did last year at the US Open. She played her best tournament up until the final, and was the best player in that tournament. So I really feel sorry that she didn't win a French Open, because I think she deserved that. But I think she achieved a lot more than a lot of people expected her. But I don't know, Steve, that's only an question that she can really answer. But I think given her, she did sustain like top 10 for a long time. So she was very, very consistent with her career. I don't know. She just was that player that played a little bit tight sometimes. And, you know, the backhand would get a little bit all over the place. And if she wasn't feeling it really big time on her forehand, I don't know the answer to it. But I think a 22-year career winning what she did, she's, for me, a lock Hall of Famer. And so I think she'd be really pleased with her career. Serena, on the other hand, I met Serena and Venus when they were 10 and 11. And I actually had dinner with Serena, Venus the other night, and way before I had COVID. So don't worry about it. But I think I met them when they were 10 and 11. So I met them before they were even remotely well known. I hit tennis balls with them, and we walked off the court, and I was with Pam Shriver at the time. I was staying with her, and she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think the little one's better." But, you know, that was Serena, of course. And the only reason is because Serena just technically was a little bit better of a player. So I've known them that long. And I just, with my personality, they had no choice but to be friends with me. I played team tennis with them many times, so I got to know them a lot better there. Our friendship just grew just from the time we were around each other. And as I said, I played world team tennis with them many times. So that was also a way. And I just befriended them. Wasn't afraid to talk to them. I wasn't afraid to be friends with them. And I spent a lot of time out with them at dinners and various different parties and things. And they've always been such great friends to me. And I just think they've been so great for tennis and just the world in general, for young African-American girls in this country. And we've seen how many of them have followed in their footsteps into tennis. And so, yeah, Serena and Venus, both Venus and Serena and I have just always remained friends, and I just adore them both.
So great. So great. Steve, this was a privilege to have Rennae on. We're both so thankful that you were able to be with us, especially with you not feeling 100%. This was a lot of fun, and thank you very much, Rennae. This was really, really great.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. And, you know, I avoided having it this weekend because I was supposed to be at the F1 races in Miami, but that got put away as soon as I got COVID. So I'm here in New York, but, you know, thanks for having me today. It was really enjoyable. And yeah, keep it going. Keep it going. We got a lot of great tennis ahead of us. We do. Thanks, Rennae. Feel better real shortly. Feel better soon. You're welcome. Thanks. Bye.